Good morning. We're back. Happy New Year. I guess we can still say that. It is another year and it's another day and it's another moment and whatever you've been doing over the holidays and I'm hoping that you've been doing some yoga, but just in case you haven't, I want to do a practice today that's just kind of this idea of moving slow, which I always do anyway, but just easing into something rather than just like giving it your all, just kind of testing the waters and seeing and observing. And remember that nothing in nature rushes and everything gets done. So today we're going to start lying down, surprise, surprise, often what I do. And we'll do the constructive rest pose. Let me tip this so I can see you. The constructive rest pose, you can have some support for your head if you really need it. And I say it that way because we're probably going to do some movement here, and sometimes having something under your head can get in the way. But also, having said that, you can pull it out at any time. So here's me putting a blanket. I'll just put a thin blanket underneath my head, just because the purpose of the constructive rest pose is to move us into the parasympathetic side of the nervous system and supporting the head and even the neck. I'm going to curl this in and support around my neck can give my nervous system the cue that it's okay to let go. So I want to start from this place of no expectations, which is, something that I'm really trying to work on myself personally, is changing my expectations. I only hurt myself when I hurt others too, but I only hurt myself when I have expectations of others and myself, really. So here we are. Legs are bent, but feet are not too close to your body, because the idea here is that we want to soften through the front of the hip joint. So soften the muscles that do the flexing, that lift the legs towards the body. And so I just bring my hands right here in front of my hip joints so I can make sure that they're soft. And if you're not sure, I've done this before, try lifting one leg and feeling which muscles pop into your hand. You don't need to know what they are, just know that they are active to lift your leg up. But then once you put your leg back down, the bend has happened, those muscles can soften. And that's the idea. Those are the ones that tend to hold on when we don't necessarily know that they're holding on. So we can start here, and then I like to move my hands to my abdomen. You can have your arms out to the sides. You can close your eyes, or you can keep your eyes open. If you're going to keep your eyes open, maybe just have a soft gaze rather than staring and letting your eyes dart around the room, if it's possible, just so that you're more able to focus on what's going on in the body. The point of this pose is to bring the mind into the body. Sawyer, Dean. Dean and Sawyer deciding to have playtime. Okay, so take a few breaths here. Anytime breath awareness, me giving you breath cues, has some kind of adverse effect, let them go. You don't have to listen to me. You can find another technique, like becoming aware of a point on your body that isn't moving, like your nose or between your eyes or the crown of your head. Take a moment to unhinge your jaw here. So I don't set New Year's resolutions. I look to see intentions, and I can make an intention every single day if I want to. It doesn't even have to be, I can make a new intention every moment of every day if I want to. And intentions for me are a little bit less about changing something, rushing to change something, or cold turkey to change something, but an intention of how I want to show up in the world. And for me, one of them is managing expectations. So while we're resting here, is there something that you want to put out into the universe? An intention of how you would like to show up for class today. Receptive, perhaps. Open to ideas. What is your go-to to hold on to what you know? May I let go of what I know so I can let something new in? I'm just giving you ideas. And under my hands, I can feel the rise and fall of my belly. And if I tune in, I can connect that to a sensation in my pelvic floor. So as I breathe in and my belly rises, I want to connect to the sensation in my pelvic floor of a letting go. And then as I exhale, my belly drops down. I can feel my hands moving downward into my body. And my pelvic floor does this drawing up towards me, towards my head. It's subtle. Pelvic floor awareness is really subtle, but it's important, my opinion. Sometimes we overlook the subtleties of life. We get fixated on the larger things, the things we can't change. If we tune into the subtleties, that's what I like to do a lot in these practices. I think if we tune into those, we can see things through a different lens. I'm not going to promise you a rose garden. I'm just going to say, hey, you get to see things differently. Notice when you're lying here and I'm asking you just to tune in to the subtleties, is it difficult? Does your mind go wandering a lot of different places? Is it possible to have compassion with yourself, bring yourself back again and again and again and again without judgment? I will promise you that we'll move. Consider taking a few deeper breaths here. Longer inhales, matching the length of the exhales to the inhales. Noticing where your breath goes in your body. If you're familiar with an ujjayi breath, a soft, almost soundless ujjayi. Doesn't have to be though. And then this last one like this, let's do a sighing breath out. So an inhale. Then you can keep your hands where they are or move them out to the side. I'm going to move mine out to the side, and I want to create a little bit of movement with my legs without letting my pelvis move. So I'm going to walk my feet in a little bit closer to me, still make sure that my hip flexors haven't fired up, haven't engaged, maybe to engage them to get them here. And then, is it possible? I'm not asking my hip flexors to move or do anything. I want to just rock my legs side to side, but keep my pelvis still. So you can have your hands on the front of your hip joints, or you can have your arms out to the sides. And again, I'm going to say this is a subtle movement. So if you think your mind says, oh, we're doing windshield wipers, and that takes the pelvis side to side, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to do less than that. Notice the weight in your feet shifts. You go from the inside edges to the outside edges, the opposite foot. And then let's go out and in. We could say like butterfly wings. Nice to be able to picture a butterfly in the dead of winter. Notice what it takes to keep your pelvis quiet. It's the same movement we were just doing, but now it's mirror images instead of moving together. So then come back into the middle and just do your left leg. So you can go in and out. Again, pelvis not moving. So what's it take to keep your pelvis steady? Where are you working? Where's the effort? And if you say in your jaw, I'm going to say, interesting. Why does your jaw need to clench to do this exercise? Why do your toes need to clench? So we're just exploring the movement of the left hip joint. And I do promise I will do bigger movements. We'll get there. Remember, the point of the class is to ease into movement. Ease into this again. Okay, then come back into the middle. Let's do the right side. Now you have something you can compare. Is it different? Is the range of motion different? And you know what? It's totally okay if it is. It's really great information that you can glean from this movement. And you can come into the center, drop it into the center. Can you notice too the effect that the bone moving in the hip socket, what effect it's having on your pelvis? Do you feel something in your pelvis? You know, we're trying to keep the pelvis still. Can you feel, I feel a narrowing in the front of the right when I let my leg drop in, and then I feel a widening in the front on the right, but I feel a narrowing at the back. So it's subtle movement. This, to me, is what deems you what level of yoga you're practicing. It's not whether you can do wild and crazy things or you have stamina. You know, maybe it's a part of it. But for me, the deepest thing is the awareness. How subtle can you go with your awareness? How much can you learn? I had a yoga teacher, one of my first yoga teachers told me that so long ago, and it always stuck with me. Okay, then come back into the middle. Let's gather both legs up and bring them towards the body so we can release the low back. You can hold on around your shins or behind your knees. Just clasp somehow or hold somehow. And if it's not possible with your hands, use a strap so that you keep them as a unit. And let's do a little rock from side to side. So I've moved into my low back. So I'm no longer resting on the back of my pelvis. I can feel that. I'm kind of rocking along the top rim of my pelvis. This kind of awareness here where we're very supported by the earth. And the movement is more subtle and simple, will serve us when we get into the more complex moves. When we're standing, we have less foundation. Okay, come back into the middle, take your arms away and notice how you're resting in your low back, and shift again so that you're resting in your pelvis. So my legs are dropped a little bit away from me, and keep on your pelvis and do the same kind of rock, but slower. I'm not going to move my upper body this time around. I want my legs to go side to side, and I want them to go as a unit and in relationship with each other. The same relationship that they have here, I want that to continue when I go to the side. And typically what happens is as I go to one side, the bottom leg slides forward and the top leg slides back. So I want to resist that and only go in the range of motion where I can keep those together and use the unit of my legs and my pelvis as one unit to rotate my spine. We do one more rotation here before we get up. So I'm resisting. I'm going to move my pillow because I'm starting to slide off of it anyway. If you find you have a little bit more rounded upper back, it'd be a great place to keep a pillow under your head. Okay, oh, that feels really good. Starting to engage my oblique muscles as I do this and my core. Then come back, bring your legs back down, take your arms up. Now, think of the same unit that you had with legs and pelvis, the same unit you're going to have a mirror image to the upper body of your arms and your shoulder girdle. So we're going to lean over to the right, keeping the pelvis on the floor, then come back and lean over to the left. I'm doing it backwards to you. So just turning in a different location in the spine. My pelvis wants to come off the floor and my arms want to move. separate from my shoulder girdle, but I'm really tuning into that sensation. And what I'm realizing is I have a bigger range of motion towards my right than I do to my left. But I already knew that. I'm just saying I can really tune in and see that one more time here. So see how I'm doing this. As I go to the right, I'm letting my left shoulder blade come off the floor, but not my right, or not my left side of the pelvis. And the space between my arms stays the same. The relationship between my chest and my arm stays the same. Do one more on each side. Okay, then come back down. Arms can come down, roll over to one of your sides, and let's come on to hands and knees. I'm going progressively higher. So this might mean for you a blanket under your knees, might mean some kind of support for your wrists. You know, I know, Anne, you like to have something there. If you're going to do something for your wrists, find something like a blanket is okay, but see what's the minimum amount that you need to keep up on the blanket in order to have contact and to feel like you can create strength in your hands. So anytime we stand on our hands, it's just a reminder for most of you, we're not just like lumps of clay in our hands just resting on the ground. I'd like you to be active in your hands. Fingers open up. I'm not going to say spread really wide, but they open up and create like a suction cup around the rim of your palm so that the center of the palm sucks up. It's almost like your arm becomes a straw and you're drawing up from the center. I'd also like to invite you to put weight, a little bit more weight into your fingerprints. So we press down. I'm going to say like a tree frog. I haven't used that analogy in a while. So then I can feel energy in my arms. I can feel from my hands coming right up into my shoulders. And the next thing I'd like to do here is sink between the shoulder blades and then lift up between the shoulder blades. So I'm taking that awareness that I have in my hands and I'm moving it up through my wrists, through my arms, and feeling, oh, I can support movement in my shoulder girdle through the strength of my arms and then my foundation. So again, not a big movement. I'm really moving a little bit more, isolating the movement between my shoulder blades versus moving my low back. I also want you to pay attention to what's the sensation you're feeling around the base of your neck. Because sometimes a shrug feels like the movement that I'm asking you to do, but I'm asking you to move more between your shoulder blades if you have an idea of where your shoulder blades are. And if you don't, really great practice to get to know your shoulder blades. And after a while, you might start to feel some fatigue. We're working the muscles along the side of the ribs called the serratus anterior. There's some core work going on here too, because I'm trying to maintain stability. Maybe stability is not the right word, but a sense of stillness in my pelvis. Okay, last one. Walk your knees further back. So here we change the weight from being all the way straight down to on an angle. Tuck your toes. It's the first downward dog. As you tuck your toes, pause for a moment before you lift your knees off the ground. See how you've changed the angle, the relationship of the earth to your hand, or not to your hand, but your hand to your arm and your shoulders. And then lengthen the back of your neck and pause. Take a breath in. Remember I said exhales, pelvic floor and abdomen draw in. So notice that happens when you exhale. And the next time you exhale, just hover your knees above the ground. Just hover them. And notice what the effort is, where the effort is, and then come back down. We're going to do that 2 more times. So it's not about getting really high off the ground. It's a subtle movement. Notice where your body wants to grip and brace to get your knees to float. Notice when the point of shifting your weight happens. And then on the last one, full downward dog. So once you notice it, then you can start to pivot around your shoulders, pivot around your hips, Open the knees, perhaps. Come into your version of downward dog, whatever that means for you right now. Is it one with bent legs? Is it one with straight legs? Why would you do bent legs over straight legs? You know, what are you feeling in your body? Maybe you're feeling like, oh, my hands, it's a lot of stuff on my wrists right now. What can I do to counter what I'm feeling in my wrists? You know, where am I putting all my weight, and can I put my weight in a different place to spread the work out through the hands? It's partly why I'm having you on your hands for so long. We'll take 2 more breaths here. If breath cues don't work for you, you don't have to do breath. Just a moment or 2, you can count. And from your downward dog, lift your head and shoulders up, look forward, and step your left foot forward. So we'll bring the left foot forward between the hands. If it doesn't get there, help it forward. And then bring your blocks in if you've got them, just so we come up a little bit higher. And at first, we'll put a lot of weight on the blocks, but we've just spent so much time on our hands. I'd like more of the weight to shift into the legs and feet. So think more of your blocks being like training wheels on a bike. So now I'm going to go to fingertips, and not so that I'm leaning into my hands, but just so that they're helping me with balance, so that I can use my legs to support me. And when I do fingertips, I like to do this kind of an action as if I'm picking something up. I'm still creating that dome, that lift to the center of my hand. Pretty little sound. As I kind of figure out how am I going to be centered in my legs. Typically, if I want to put all my weight in my hands, it's because I've got all my weight in my front foot. So I got to get some weight in the back foot, which means opening up the sole of the foot. Okay, come back down. You can shift your blocks off to the side, hands back down, back into downward dog. We'll take 2 breaths in downward dog. Not a lot of instruction yet. Just want to focus on what you're feeling. And then right foot forward. If it doesn't get there, help it forward. Bring your blocks back in, and let's see, is it a different story? How am I going to shift my weight from all these 4 points or 5 points of contact? I've got to do something in my hip joint. So I want to stabilize my hip joint. I want to get my right sit bone to drop down and tuck under. Then I can push into my feet, lift my back knee, and shift my weight further back as I'm doing it so that I can be here with this lighter touch. So, you know, kind of play. Is it possible? What if I did take both hands off? Is that possible? What needs to happen in my body? Okay, we're going to go back to the first side again. So let's come down, back into downward dog. So take care when you're setting your hands up, same as we did the very first time. Notice the moment you hover your knees and you shift. In downward dog, now let's everybody bend your knees and take a little bit wider step. You may do your own version, but I'm just asking you to try something here. Bend your knees with your feet, not quite as wide as your mat, but you know, wider than you might normally. And as you bend your knees, you have more space now to shift your hips back. So get as long as you can from your fingertips to your sit bones. Feel the length through the sides of your waist, sides of your chest, the sides of your neck. Once you have that feeling, that sensation, that awareness, is it possible to maintain that, particularly the length from your pubic bone up to your collarbones, as you move your legs in the direction of straight? And I say that is a direction, not necessarily a destination. 2 breaths. And if your spine changed its shape, bend your legs again. Okay, shift again so that your left foot can come forward. Starting on the left again. This is the building blocks of all the poses. So now a higher lunge. We're going to stay here. Come onto your fingertips, shift your weight into your back leg so that you can take your hands away. And if you find you're not stable, remember what happens with the left sit bone. It needs to drop down and roll under. So it rolls from the left to the right. Another possibility is you can bring your hands to your thigh, or you're here. And you have a choice. Arms go back or arms go forward. Play and see what's the difference. Arms become a longer lever here as they go forward. And I want to try to connect my whole body, including my arms and my leg, to this movement. Left sit bone drops down and tucks under. I have to keep reminding myself of that because it doesn't want to do that. Hands come down, blocks out, back into downward dog. Breath. Bend your knees, create length in your spine. Shift forward, right foot. Same idea. So it's so great. Repetition is the mother of skill. And it's through the subtleties that we'll gain the shifts that we need to. That's a promise I'll make. Okay, how you want to come up? Right sit bone down and tuck under. It's going to come in handy, that action, when we do more asymmetrical poses, standing poses. So arms back, arms forward. What's the difference? Remember the rhomboid movement of the shoulder blades. Can you find that? Bring your shoulder blades in. Do you feel balance between the front and back legs? We've got all this weight forward. Okay, hands down. Step back, downward dog. Downward dog is the point in between. Bend your knees long through the spine. Move your legs in the direction of straight to the point where you can still maintain the length. Pause, then step your left foot forward. Bring your blocks in again. Okay, so now take your right leg. Actually, climb up. We'll climb up and we'll come more upright. Step your back foot in just a little bit. Bring one hand to the front of your pelvis and another hand to the back of your pelvis. Bend your back knee and help your pelvis to come more vertical. So in the last pose, pelvis was really on an angle forward. So now we're saying bend the back knee, gives you the space to bring your pelvis more upright. Now keep your hands where they are. Watch what I do with my back leg. I'm still facing my shoulders forward, but I want to rotate my right leg and rotate my pelvis. I'm still keeping it upright and I'm keeping my shoulders facing forward. And then undo that and try again. Hands here, pelvis more upright. Let your leg rotate, let your pelvis rotate, keep your shoulders forward. See how difficult it is. The pelvis wants to tip back forward again. We want to resist that. So where you put your back foot matters. So maybe you step it in a little bit closer. Third time, try it a third time. When I do it that way, now I know where my hip flexors are without a doubt. Shoulders facing forward, take your arms up to the degree you can. They can be parallel, but they don't have to be. So this is a warrior one pose. I love this idea of feeling it as a spiral coming up from my back outer heel. You think about that for a second, spiraling through the body. One more breath here. And then bring your hands down. Back into the downward dog, friend of ours. So each time you come to downward dog, notice what you're feeling. Notice if there are differences from one to the next. Okay, right foot forward. Blocks in. Climb up. Hand on the front of the pelvis, hand on the back of the pelvis. Rotate your back leg. Notice, is this too far? If it's too far, step in a little bit. Still keeping your left foot on its own side. Leg rotates first. Pelvis rotates around the front leg last. And third time. Pelvis is upright. As you move your leg and your pelvis, you want to maintain that resistance and land the outer left heel down. Then I know where my hip flexors are. Then I can say, okay, I'm going to keep that movement or that stabilization of my pelvis and lift my arms up. See how complex we got so quickly? Longing for the moments of lying on the mat where it was very still and easy. Notice too, when you do this, are you changing the shape of your spine? You know, what's the relationship between your rib cage and your pelvis? You created this shape of the pelvis. Can you stack the rib cage on top of it? What's the distance you need to be able to do that with relative ease and not forcing? Okay, come back down, step forward. Move your blocks forward. It's time for a symmetrical forward bend. 2 phases to a forward bend. Take your feet really wide, even though you might be able to do it closer. Take them almost as wide as the mat. Bend your knees and start to see where your knees line up. Do you want to adjust where your feet are based on how your knees are moving? We want ease in the knees, no pain in the knees. Let's come into a little bit deeper squat and then come back up. Notice when you come into a deeper squat, where does the weight in your feet go? Do you shift more to the inner edges? Do you shift more to the outer edges? Does one foot do one thing and another foot does the other thing? Last time, I lied. Hold in this position and start to come forward, keeping your weight in your feet. Come forward to your blocks or to the floor, whatever you need. You can change the block height. And then again, with the spine long, begin to move in the direction of straight of your legs, with your legs. When you start to feel the resistance in the backs of the legs, notice the shape of your spine, how it changes. We are doing a forward bend that is extension in the spine, that is long. It's downward dog in your spine at this point. That's why we're doing the really bent knees to start and wide feet so that we've got space for your pelvis to tip over the tops of the thigh bones. Spine is long. Okay, bend your knees a little bit more. Center your weight in your feet if it shifted and come back up again. Okay, we're going to go into phase 2 now. Same idea, bend your knees. So this is like a wide-legged Utkatasana or fierce posture. We hinge at the hips and we start to bend forward. Spine is still long. Hands to the floor, to your blocks. Start to move your legs in the direction of straight. And then allow your spine to curve, to round. And if you can, be aware of where it's rounding. Is it rounding more in your upper back? What happened to your pelvis? Did your pelvis roll backwards? And kind of do it and then undo it and then do it and then undo it. Explore a little bit. These classes are all about exploration. Nice. Got you off your hands for a moment, Anne. Okay, then make your way back up again. I like to come centered, bend my knees, and then stand up. You can step your feet to whatever distance you feel stable with. If you want to do them close together, do them close together. Separate, it's up to you, totally. Take your arms out to the sides and lift up. Hold on to your right wrist, I'm mirroring you. And lift up from your elbow. So outer heel to elbow. Imagine a straight line there, even though nothing in nature has straight lines. Lengthen up as if it were a straight line. Then keep that lifted. So imagine there's a band here that you're making taut. Then start to shift your hips. So your weight goes into your left foot more. Shift your hips over to the, right, because I'm mirroring you. Shift your hips over to the right. Then come back up. We're going to do it again. Shift your hips over that way, but stay long through this side now. Continue from your elbow, using your hand on your wrist to lift up right through your wrist. That'll be nice traction through your wrist. after all the stuff we were just doing. One last time. So I really kind of hooked right here, and now I'm lengthening. I'm just trying to stay open through this side. Okay, and then down. Notice the difference between one side and the other side. What sometimes tends to happen is as we go into this position, maybe I'll show you kind of 3/4, we have to do a little bit of a back bend or a forward bend. So this is Tadasana. Bring your arms back up again. Hold on to the other wrist. This is the left wrist this time. And lift elbow first. Connect the dots between your elbow and your outer heel. As your outer heel descends, your elbow lifts. Right in here, open up through your armpit. Lots of lymph nodes in this whole area that need this movement to help. Then start to shift your hips over and lengthen. How far? Doesn't have to be what I'm doing. What do you feel? Let's try it a few times. Notice if you're back bending. Notice if you're forward bending. Notice if you're twisting, if your body starts to rotate to get this to happen. None of them are wrong. I'm going to say there's only cause and effect. Oh, feels so good. You can traction through your wrist. And then come back. Arms down and notice. So now turn sideways so you're like me, the orientation that I have on my mat. And then you can still see me. You have the luxury of, you can move your mat around in your house if you want to turn it so that it's sideways to me. And then take a step out from the center. We're going to take a step out one side. And then whatever distance you stepped on that side, we're going to try to do the same distance on the other side. I'd ideally like my heels to be lining up. So if you're not sure, you can come right to the back of your mat and line your heels up. Which direction your feet turn in is totally up to you and your legs and the conversation you're going to have between your feet and your knees and your hips. So what does it feel like to turn your feet really in far and then bend your knees? And that's the cue I hear a lot of yoga teachers saying is pigeon toe your feet and then turn them straight ahead. Try to bend your knees. This is slow and it's subtle, so try to do it that way. Ease into the movement. And then turn your feet out so they're pointing out and try to bend your knees. What happens? Typically, the restriction of your hips will cause your knees to go probably someplace that they don't have any business going. So then come back to where's the perfect place? Okay, then I'm going to mirror you, right leg. Shift your weight a little bit more to your left so you can lift your toes up on your right leg. And the first movement, my pelvis is right here. The first part of the movement is a rotation of my thigh bone. When I can't go any further with my thigh bone, then I'm going to move my pelvis. And my pelvis then rotates over this leg. Does that make sense? So I move this leg, then my pelvis. I want to complete the movement until my leg is now facing this way. So my pelvis went from here to here somewhere because I let it move around my back leg. Get your head around that one. Now, though, I want to bend my front knee. Remember, we're easing into these poses. You've probably done them 100 times. Notice when you're doing this, I'll just have my hands here just to remind me of where my pelvis is, but you can have your hands on your waist. Where is this knee going? Does it want to turn inward? Can I get it to go straight? Do I need to adjust where my pelvis is to get it to go? Do I need to adjust where my back foot is to get it to go? A lot of little moving pieces here, a lot of things to factor in. Another thing I'd like you to consider when you're doing this, maybe we'll turn back in, we'll go the other side. So we turn the left leg. Just get a sense, what movement do I have in that? We did that exploration at the very beginning. What kind of range of motion do I have? It's really good to kind of get a sense of that so I know how I'm compensating if my movement is not as big as my other side. Then I'm turning my pelvis, and I need to turn my back foot on this side, turn my back foot more in because I want my leg to face forward. So we do the same thing. You know, what do I need to adjust in order to make my knee go forward? Not kind of forward. This would be kind of forward. Remember that action before I said your sit bone in the lunge? This is like a lunge. Left sit bone drops down and tucks under. And when it does that, my knee will go out and go forward. That's the idea anyway. You always have your hand here too. The other thing that I'd like you to pay attention to here is, am I leaning forward? Or am I able to move my leg forward? And remember that movement of the pelvis. I want to keep my pelvis more upright as I bend my front knee. Now I'm getting into some bigger sensations in my back leg. Okay, one more time. I have to add one more thing to it. Turn again, come back into the center. You might be getting wider and wider. Okay, repetition is the mother of skill. So rotate your right leg. Rotate your pelvis over your left leg. It's around your left leg until your pelvis turns so that you can get your leg to go forward. And you can do your hands, one on your pelvis, front and back. Take your front leg forward, right sit bone drops down and tucks under. Okay, once you have that, can you hold it? My pelvis is here. I don't want to change where my pelvis is. I want to come higher and turn my rib cage now to the left. I want to be able to separate what my pelvis is doing. It's stable. Now I want to move and rotate here and bring my arms up. Warrior two, one we've done 100 million times. So pause here, breathe and notice. If you want to come in, one of my favorite ways to practice is to come in and out of a pose and really study, what is my body trying to do? How is it trying to compensate? What is my mind telling me about this pose that I should or shouldn't be doing? Where's my connection? Do I still have a connection to the outer heel back here? Okay, slowly come back up. Rotate your leg and your pelvis back into the center. Okay, other side, and then I'll change it up again. So left leg rotates, pelvis rotates, and it's rotating around this back thigh. So now my pelvis is facing here. I have to turn it a little bit more on this side. So that means I'm also going to turn my back foot. I'm sending my back heel back more. I want to have an awareness of my right sit or my left sit bone as I bend it. As I bend my front knee, my left sit bone comes down and I want to tuck it under. I also want to be aware of my pelvis. It's not that I need to keep it upright, but I want to resist going into a back bend in this pose. I want to resist having my body going forward. I kind of want to stay more centered with my body. Again, it's not that it's wrong to do that. It's like what I want to get out of this pose is that opening in the back leg. And I'm not going to get that if I take my body forward. I need to have hip extension here. So one more time, come into where you want to land in this pose. Check where your weight is in your feet. Check what your pelvis is doing, the relationship between your rib cage and your pelvis, and then rotate your rib cage. It's moving from left to right. This is my harder side. I can tell it's different. So I'm not going to worry about being completely square to my mat. My mat is arbitrary. I need to be true to what's happening in my body. That's as far as I can go. If I show you that from the front, that's where I'm at. I want to keep my arms in line with my body. That's as far as I'm going to go. We get to make up our poses that fit with our bodies. Okay, notice, come in, come out. This is your exploration. What are you feeling? How is your body different doing this side? Those are the subtleties. You'll never have to do an advanced pose ever again when you start thinking like this. Easing into movement. And then, well, this is quite an advanced pose in my opinion. Then rotate. And then we'll do heel toe back into the center. Notice when you come to stand what it feels like in Tadasana. Interlace your fingers. Turn your palms forward and lift your arms up. As you lift your arms up, notice what's happening with your rib cage. Notice what's happening with your shoulders. What is the point of this? Why would I have you do this? Not to reach a shape, but to feel something. So can you figure out, what do you want to feel from this pose? Release, bring them back down. Let's do pendulum arms. And then we'll go interlace the opposite way, forward and up. I'm still learning information about my body. Did I take my pelvis forward to do this? I'm exaggerating a bit, but did that happen in any shape or form for you? Did your rib cage start tipping back as you come up? Did your shoulders start to lift up towards your ears? Maybe I don't go for a full straight arm. Direction versus destination. And then what am I feeling? What do I want from this pose? What can I adjust to feel something that would be beneficial? Okay, pendulum arms, one more time. I keep switching which arm goes in front. And then Urdhva Hastasana. Come back to the front of your mat. Bring your hands to your waist, top rim of your pelvis. You can set your feet however you want them to be set. Be aware of your feet now like suction cups. And for a moment, I'll just turn this way. Lift your toes up and feel the points of contact on the floor. You can lay them back down, pick them back up. Big toe base, baby toe base, center of your heel. Those are the 3 points I'd like to focus on today. When you lay your toes back down, can you lay them out long and separate and still maintain the connection to those 3 points? You're better to keep your head lifted right on top of your spine than to try to look to see what your toes are doing. Just know if you just know you're working at it, it doesn't matter. Destination doesn't really matter. It's more, what does it feel like when you do that action? Then for me, I feel my feet are active, my ankles are active. I'm active all the way up through my legs, right up to my hips. I can even feel my buttocks engaging, just stabilizing me. Then let's come into a forward bend. Knees can be bent. I'm really a big fan in my own practice, coming into a forward bend with legs bent, because then I can stay connected to what I've done with my feet. Then hands to the blocks, to the floor, play a little bit with moving towards extension, and then flexion. Flexion is rounding of the spine, extension is lengthening the spine. And I look to the front of my body for that. Both cases, I want to stay long through the front of my body and know what's happening in the back of my body at the same time. If you need to, you can peek to see what I'm doing. This is flexion. And again, I can do this with straight legs. You might not be able to do that. And this is extension. Flexion, including my head, and extension. Bring your hands back down, step back, come into plank. Take some time to set up your hands. You can come to your knees if you need to. We're going to hold plank for a few breaths. Really great idea to have a little bit more weight, an awareness of putting weight in your index finger and thumb when you're weight bearing on your hands. Notice where your pelvis is in space. Is it forward? Is it lifted? Where is your head in relationship to your rib cage, in relationship to your pelvis, in relationship to your legs? If you need to, you can come down to your knees. What else is working in your body? Can you tell? I also want to create an action of lengthening here. So I want to reach the crown of my head forward as if I'm leaning it into a wall. And at the same time, I want to press my heels back as if I'm leaning them into a wall. One more breath. Knees down to the floor, right where they're at. Point your toes back. We'll come halfway, pointing your elbows back. Stay broad through your collarbones. I say halfway, but it's really loosely halfway. What I'm not doing is dropping my pelvis forward like this. We will drop the pelvis forward, but not quite yet. So I have this space. My thighs are on a diagonal line, and I'm working on some upper body strengthening as well as core. I'm also trying to be aware of whether I'm reaching my head forward. Last time, come down to where you're able to come down to, pause, then start to release your pelvis to the floor, and then your belly to the floor. And stay in this cobra position. Notice if your legs are just kind of floating here. And then release, come down. We'll come off our hands, set your hands up like this, and bring your forehead down. Let's change it so that the legs aren't just floating here. You're doing the same action in your feet that you did when you were standing. Instead of lifting your toes, you're pressing your toes into the floor because they're upside down. It's the same action though. Can you find how that helps to create stability in your legs? Pressing my toenails down as if I'm trying to lift them up, if I were standing. And I'm creating this sense of strength from my feet right up to my hip joints. Then bring your head and lift it off of your hands. Bring your head in line with your spine. And notice what your belly wants to do, because you're anticipating that I'm going to say lift your arms away, because I am. Pause here and go, what would it take to lift my arms away from the floor? But don't actually do it. Keep your legs active. That's going to be key here. Keep your legs active. I'm not asking you to lift your arms away from the floor, not yet. What I'm asking you to do next is to lift your elbows away from the floor. Whole new ball game now. Pause here. Next step are hands away from the floor. So what needs to happen? Keep your legs active. Abdomen toned. Hands come up. You can bring your hands right to your forehead and rest your head on your hands to help keep lengthening from the crown of the head right through your toes. And then release back down. Rest for a moment. Bring your hands now beside. That's all you get is just a moment. Bring your hands beside your chest. I'm saying kind of, here's my armpit. My shoulder would be here. I want to come a little further back, not quite underneath my shoulders, because I want to try to get my hands to support a lift of the front of the shoulder. So can you see that? My shoulders are dipping down. What I want to do is use my hands as leverage to lift up and widen. As I lift up and then widen, my shoulder blades come towards each other. So that's the action here. Activate your legs the same way, and let me know if you don't know what that means. Just pressing your toenails into the floor, toe knuckles. I can feel that work all the way up through my legs. Then press into the floor, and instead of just pushing your body up, press down and try to pull back with the floor, so you're making your body go longer. Does that make sense? Imagine that you're on like a surfboard and you're trying to paddle out to the ocean. I'm creating length in the front of the body, but I also want to keep length in the back of the body. So same idea. Keep breathing here. What would it take? Don't do it, but what would it take to take your hands off the floor? And then when you're ready, prepare your body without gripping or bracing and take your hands off the floor. Your head is leaning forward into a wall. Your toes are reaching back and touching the wall behind you. And then slowly come back down. You can turn your head, you can rest. Ooh, that was a lot of work. It was a lot of work for me. I haven't done core work like that for a while. And it really is. When we're doing low belly down back bends like that, it's core work. It's back strengthening too, but there are muscles in the back of the body that are part of your core. Okay, bring your hands beside your chest again. Heel yourself up off the floor. Let's shift back, come into table, and do a little movement. In case you were really feeling like you were still working just in your low back, just above your sacrum, if that's the part that you feel the most tension in right now, let's do a little bit of movement to release it. I like to shift my hips back and drop my tailbone down to open up through that space. You can do anything you want here. We're moving towards child's pose next. Then we'll do a rotation, then you get Shavasana. Simple. It's a fast class. Went by fast. Okay, now to come back to child's pose, there's two ways. You can keep your legs together or take your knees apart. I'd like you over the course of the next 8 weeks to try both and see if you can figure out why you do one way and why you do another, because they give you different things. If you're going to follow me, I'm keeping my legs close together, parallel, and I'm sending my sit bones back. I'm keeping my whole low belly long, and I'm deepening my hip creases here. So I'm going into it knowing that I want deeper hip creases and length through the front of the body. Then I'm going to land wherever I land. If child's pose is really not a pose that your body gets anything out of, then don't do it. You can roll onto your back. The point of this for me is to stabilize the pelvis and move into a deeper flexion in the spine. And flexion is this rounding. So if you can do that in another shape, then do that in another shape that doesn't adversely affect your ankles, your knees, or your hips. And wherever you happen to be, if you have your back exposed to the room, send some breath there. If you're laying on your back, harder to do that, but you can send breath into the side of the ribs. So perhaps deeper breaths, if that's something you're able to do. And allow yourself some time for your body to respond to what you're doing. Consciously directing the breath to places in your body. It can work. Okay, slowly come back up. Let's shift over to one hip. I'd like to do, have your strap nearby just in case we have time for Supta Padangusthasana. You can have a blanket for your pillow in anticipation of Shavasana. That's around the corner. And lay down. And for a moment, I'm going to say brief Shavasana. 5 breaths of Shavasana. To feel the connection of your body to the earth, to feel the effects of everything you've been doing in your practice. Then center your legs, bend your right leg, and bring it towards you. You can have both hands around your shin or underneath your knee. Your knee is bending. And you're going to let the weight of your hands and your arms hold your leg in place. So what I'm not doing is I'm not pulling. I want to let the weight settle into my pelvis. So I'm staying pretty much on my pelvis here. If I pull my leg in, I shift into my low back. As we move into a rotation, I want to stay neutral in my spine. I just want to let the weight settle in first. Then keep holding on to your leg with your left hand and take your right hand up and behind your head to support where your neck and your head join. Use your left hand now to pull your leg right across your body to the degree that you start to feel some stretch sensation in your outer right hip. Pelvis can turn. You might need it to turn a little bit. And then keep drawing your leg across your body. You can use your elbow to help you turn until you roll completely onto your left side and your right leg comes right down and touches the floor. And if it feels like it's too far, so remember I'm turned on my side, I'm showing you from the back so you can see I'm totally on my side. That's how I get my leg to go down. But if your leg is still, you feel something in your hip, you can always prop it up on a block or a blanket. So from here, I've got my left hand anchoring my right knee down, and I've got my right hand behind my head. Then start to roll back onto your right hand. So head rolls back onto your hand, but you keep your leg there. I'm not trying to get my right shoulder blade on the ground. I'm trying to find a rotation through my spine that feels really great. At the same time, I start to have this opening through the top of my right chest. If you can maintain the line of your upper arm, that means your arm rests or reaches out up here, then you can extend your elbow. But if your arm starts to drop down, chances are you're going to lose that opening through the front of the chest because the shoulder rolls forward. So we're going to keep it up. You can do a bent elbow if you feel that's a little bit easier on your shoulder, less weight with a long lever. And the rest of the pose is you breathing, feeling that how your body is subtly moving your body parts with the breath in this shape. I'm going to come and peek at you. Yeah. Okay, nice. Okay, let's slowly come back out. To come back out, I like to roll back on my side, straighten my top leg, and then roll back. And I'm breaking it down into simple movements. When we try to come out of a pose, a complex pose, in a simple way, like with one fell swoop, sometimes that's when we get into trouble. So come back into Shavasana for a moment. Symmetry, just to check in with the nervous system. And then bend your legs again, or sorry, not bend your legs, bend your left leg. Bring your left leg in, hold on underneath your knee or around your shin, and let the weight of your arms hold it in place. And let your pelvis be centered, as centered as possible. It's possible that if you have short arms, you might need to use a strap to help you with this. Knowing that that's where we're headed is pelvis more stable and balanced. I'm not worried about my right leg here. I'm going to let it roll out if it needs to roll out. That's a tighter hip flexor doing that. Okay, so right hand stays on your knee, left hand up behind your head, supporting your head and neck. And then let's get the outer hip stretch first. So pull across just to, that's the spot. Outer hip, buttocks. This is instead of a pigeon pose today. And then let's continue to go. And you go all the way over to your side. Your knee comes down. You can shift your hip a little bit if you need to. I like to shift my hip backwards. And then I keep my leg anchored. Start to lean your head back, roll your head back into your left hand. And there's the rotation. Might not be what you're used to, but give it a try, see what it does. I'm going to tell you, I do it this way because it keeps the spine more neutral. And rotations need to happen with a neutral spine if we're going to rotate where it's optimal to rotate in the spine. Of course, I'm always going to say, if you need to do it a different way, do it a different way. If your rotation is more open here, you want to bring your arm out. I'm not against your shoulder blade coming down to the floor, but notice how that's happening. I like to move, if I take my hand out from underneath my head, I like to move my arm around a little bit. If I go a little bit higher, I get pec minor lengthening. Go more out to the side, I get pec major. And then the fibers of pec major, pectoralis, I can get them from different angles here. Like where am I the tightest? Where could I use some more love? But if it's like way too much on your shoulder, keep your hand under your head. Take the lever away and you'll still get an opening through your chest. You can see parts of bodies. Okay, take your time. We're going to roll back onto the side first. Roll to your side first. Yeah. Bring your arm over. You got it, Mark. Bring your arm over first. Yep, onto your side. Straighten your leg. Roll back. Well, that's my way of doing it. You can have your own way, but that's what I'm suggesting. I always try to give you the rationale for why I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay. Is there a symmetrical pose you'd like to do? Is your body saying, hug your legs in? Or is it saying, do bridge pose? Or what does it need? What do you need right now before going into Shavasana? Oh, happy baby. That's an option too. And then settle into whatever shape you want to settle into for Shavasana. I'll share with you this wonderful head support blanket, short folded like this, with the corners of the top one tucked in. And then when I lay down, my shoulders rest here. My shoulders are supported. Just the edges of my shoulders get supported. And then I tuck this in around my head. I used to go around in classes and push people's shoulders down. And I realized through the practice of restorative yoga, what we really need is to go into a resting pose supported rather than pushed into a position my body doesn't want to go into. I need to support it where it is, and then it'll let go. So check in with yourself. How did you practice today? How did you show up today? How did you set the tone for the rest of the day? Hear the sound of my voice. And if you're wanting to stay put for a little longer, then please do. You can tune me out if possible. Otherwise, let your body move how it wants to move. How does it want to wake up? You can do Shavasana anytime during the day. Think of it as not just the end of a class or an end of a practice. It's supposed to take you away from whatever is going on in your life and give you a pause. Fully supported by the earth. It's a really great feeling. Not suggesting laying outside, but you could do a snow angel and then just lay there. Feel the snow falling on your face. So if you want to, you can come and make your way to sit. Thank you for easing into the practice with me today. Be safe, be well, peace.